Good morning. Is it a good morning? All right, good. Glad to hear it. Are there any Harry Potter fans in the room? Show of hands. Oh, wow, impressive. Has anybody seen or read Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them? All right, excellent. Well, that was the inspiration for the title of this talk, and I was super stoked. Have quotes and screenshots from the movies, and was going to tie it all together, and then the lawyers got involved. So I hope you're not as disappointed as I am that there are no magical creatures at all in this presentation. So setting the stage for today, we're going to talk about accessing your data wherever it lives, whether that's databases or applications or files, stuff that's beyond the Connect menu. We're going to explore the strengths and weaknesses of each of those approaches. So my name is Drew Loika. I'm a product manager at Tableau. I've been here for about 5 years. First 3 were focused on our hosted product, Tableau Online, and then the last couple have been focused on connecting to data living in cloud applications. If you looked at the schedule, you'll notice I'm supposed to have a co-presenter, Sid Ray. He was super excited about being here, and a few weeks ago he was involved in a bicycle accident on his way to work with a car. It was pretty serious, and so I hope you all will join me in wishing him a complete and speedy recovery. Before we jump into kind of what the other options are, I think a good foundation for understanding is going with our named connectors, and that can give us context. So let's talk about what they are, how they work, and the challenges you face when accessing different types of data. What is a named connector? It's what you see in the Connect menu. I would imagine that that's probably where all of you started, whether it was a file or database or whatever it was you were connecting to. These represent a lot of work and a big effort on Tableau's part. It's getting something on this menu is a pretty lengthy process. These tend to be tuned for the functionality of the underlying data source. We support them so you can call in and get help. We maintain them as they change and add functionality. We try to have pretty helpful documentation for you in order to get you up and running. Some of them, and this will be happening I think more and more, have added functionality. And this last one is, we're not quite as far as we want to be, but we really want these to be cross-platform. So whether you're on Windows or Mac desktop, and then publishing to Windows or Linux server. Tableau is constantly adding new name connectors, although never as fast as we want. Here's a list of just what we added in 2017. In addition to this, we were updating and maintaining our existing connectors and then also adding some pretty significant new functionality to some of them. So here's a viz that I pulled from, data that I pulled from DB Engines. It's a website that tracks popularity. Size of the box reflects the popularity. This is not a definitive source of truth, but it kind of gives us a place to start. Orange indicates that Tableau has a name connector. Blue, we do not. Somebody on the connectivity team actually really liked this viz. It reminds me of the progress that we've made because we're always focused on what it is that we don't do yet. Excuse me. That being said, there's some pretty big names over there in the blue. We've definitely got some holes to fill. Like I get pretty continuous requests for Elasticsearch, for example. So I think how Tableau works and where connectors fit into the picture gives us some valuable context. When you're interacting with a viz, dragging and dropping and filtering and sorting and all that, that's represented in VizQL. VizQL is constantly emitting queries for the data that it needs. Those queries are described by AQL, our analytic query language. You can kind of think of that as abstract SQL. That gets passed to the connector. That will translate that abstract query into something that actually works with a particular data source, and that's where some last mile tuning comes in to try to make the most and the best of what it is you're asking for. There's a variety of things that we think about when making a name connector. Security, you want to keep your data safe, and whatever's there, we want to try to be able to use that. Whether it's authenticating with SSL certs or SAML or whatever it is. We'll be looking at the protocol, the standard for talking to the data source, if there is one, and how to make the most of that. We'll look at the capabilities of the individual data source and the performance implications of those, and how to try to make the most of it for analytic style queries, which are might be different than transactional style stuff. And then it really gets down deep into the specific dialect of how to talk to that data source, and what functions are available, and what data types, and all of that. I think it's also really important to understand the difference between a live connection and an extract. This also gets a little confusing because you can use a live connection to create an extract, but some connectors are extract only. So in the traditional scenario, the connector is constantly making requests of something, maybe an ODBC driver. That in turn is emitting a live query to the data source, which returns the data back to Tableau. Each time you interact, there's a new query. Sometimes those data sources are slow. Sometimes they're not designed at all for analytics. Sometimes you don't want to place load on that data source, even if it is. That's where an extract comes into play. So in that scenario, the driver is used to retrieve all of the data once, an extract is created, and then that's served up by the Tableau data engine, which is, of course, heavily optimized for analytic-style queries. Tableau is doing all of the work of giving you a really delightful analytic experience. This is a big area of investment for Tableau. You might have heard Hyper mentioned at the conference once or twice. That's going to be our next generation data engine. Looking forward to where we see all of this going over the course of the following years. So, regardless of exactly where it lives, you're typically connecting to one of 5 different types of data. Relational is probably what you're all most familiar with. SQL Server, it's nice rectangular data. You can perform joins. That along with OLAT cubes is something Tableau is very, very good at. This is what our product was founded on accessing. We've only continued to improve. You're usually in pretty good shape in those scenarios. Time series data, you have to do a little bit more work. Common scenario here is operational data. So you might not know Tableau Online puts all of its events into Splunk, and those are recorded there, and then we'll run queries and stuff across them to monitor. Of course, not only operational data, KDB is really popular in the finance world. So for very fast, high volumes of financial data. Moving on to document databases. These are, of course, pretty popular, widely adopted. They're optimized for different scenarios, though. Their query engines weren't really built for analytic-style queries. Fortunately, there's been a trend in recent years to add an analytic layer on top of it. People are wanting to be able to get that data out. So that's why we now have a MongoDB BI connector. Also with document databases, you have a challenge around schema consistency. Sometimes it's a feature that you can stuff whatever in there, and that gets pretty challenging when you're expecting to get a similar record back and aggregating and whatnot. As for graph databases, well, Tableau's got a lot of work here to do. Our products don't really even understand the concept. We have no way of visualizing graph data. This is definitely a challenge for us, and it's unfortunate because graph data, for example, can show you relationships between people and places and activities, and allow you to infer other things. So we're missing out by not having better support for those, and it's something I hope changes. Anybody at least familiar with Tinder in the audience? By this point, you might be wondering, why we have the name connectors that we do. What are the reasons for choosing to add the new ones that we do? We throw in darts at a board. No. Definitely, kind of the obvious one right there is it popular? Is it something our customers are using? Does it have a lot of adoption in the marketplace? From there, We talked about these things being pretty complicated and hard to build. So do we have the material to understand what we need to do? Is there clear documentation available? That being said, that's usually not enough. And so another really big consideration for us is the engagement level of the partner. When we run into those problems that are really deep and dirty, can we actually sit down with the engineer that wrote that code and figure it out and figure out the optimal solution? Partners that are willing to use our data verification tools, TDVT, are also a real consideration for us. Tableau emits a different style, analytic style queries, which a lot of these data sources might not be real good at handling. So getting your data source to pass that test gives us a lot more confidence in our ability of this working well. Next one on the list is something you maybe didn't expect to see, but we don't want to be breaking your laptop. We definitely don't want Tableau server administrators working overnight because a driver upgrade borked their server. We really look for a clean driver install and an upgrade process. It's not everything that it should be, but like say on Linux, man, wouldn't it be great if it was just apt-get install package, and then boom, you're done. Because your data is important, of course we want to have the security that you need in place, but some of this stuff gets pretty complicated, especially with the way that systems interact, and it's challenging enough to implement that for us. And then if we're also debugging the data sources, Kerberos implementation, then that gets really challenging. And so people that have already figured that out make a big difference for us. I think you can read most of the reasons why we'll pass. I think one of them that's interesting to call out is platform support. You'll notice that we don't support everything on Mac that we do on Windows, and then there are some limitations of Linux as well, but this is not acceptable to our customers, and it's not acceptable for us, and so we're constantly pushing and trying to make the connector work on all platforms. Another interesting one is client-side shadow databases, but I'll get to that in a bit. If there are any partners to the room, come talk to us afterwards. I really wish that we could connect to all of customers' data. I mean, that's the ideal for me. The only limitation there is time and resources. So at a minimum, come up, have a conversation. We can see some of what the possibilities are, and maybe make a plan for the future. All right, so why are we all here? What happens when you don't have a named connector? What do you do? How do you get started? Clearly, there's way more data out there than Tableau can quickly and easily connect to. In that scenario, you've got a little bit more work to do, unfortunately. And you need to start with knowing what it is that you want. Are you looking for a specific value, or are you looking for the data around a particular business use case? Or do you really need to go out and get all of it and make all of that available to yourself and to your users? Also think about how many rows are involved in this. Is this a few thousand, a few million, 100 billion? You're going to come to go in a very different direction depending. And then how often are you refreshing this data? Most of the time, people don't really need live access when you actually talk through their use case, but some of you do. If you're looking at what happened in the last 60 seconds, one of the extract-only solutions is probably not a good fit for you. From there, go and familiarize yourself with the data source itself. How can you talk to it? How can you ask it for data? What does it support? Does it support SQL? Great. Are you expected to use a proprietary library to access it? Or maybe there's an API. Everything has a REST API these days. And then what are you getting back? Some applications will give you a Tableau extract. Boom, done. That's it. Those API responses might be a bunch of JSON, or you could be downloading a CSV or an Excel file. That, again, really impacts the direction to head. From there, once you have an idea of what you need, go out and look. Did somebody already build it? You're probably not the first person trying to connect to the data source in Tableau. Go to the vendor. They might even have instructions for Tableau. If they don't, they might have more general, say like ODBC instructions. If the vendor itself doesn't have a solution, look at one of the vendors that specialize in this space. Magnitude, Progress, CData. A lot of them and others will have solutions for getting you access to your data. And don't forget about the big ETL platforms. Some of the larger businesses in the room probably already have that in their business. You have to go talk to that team, but those solutions can have hundreds of connectors and then a lot of extra power around that. And so that might be what gives you a really delightful experience. Also take a look at the Tableau Web Data Connector community. This is typically people just like you. They had a need. They went out and wrote just enough code to solve their problem, and then they shared it. That might solve your problem immediately, or it might give you a big head start. Also, don't forget about the open source community. You probably won't find as many generic, Tableau-centric solutions there, but there's a lot of data out there that a lot of people want access to, and they might have already written something to make it easier, and then what it does might be easier to consume in Tableau. Any photographers in the room? A few? Oh, no, okay, pretty good, pretty good. Favorite types of photography: landscape, portrait, macro, wedding. All right, all right. I've done a bit of all of it, albeit pretty poorly. I started out with landscape. These days, though, pretty much all of my photography is of my son. His name is Sloan. This is a shoot from a couple months ago, and he turns 1 next month. So I've got years and years worth of photography. I use a piece of software called Adobe Lightroom to manage all that. Tracks a lot of data about the images, has non-destructive edits, etc. So the other day when I was working on some photography with my son, that got me thinking about how my photography has changed. Do I shoot as much as I used to? No, I don't have any time. But I do shoot some. Where am I shooting? Of what am I shooting? These are the exact types of questions that Tableau is good at answering. So this is a great example of what we just walked through. Now I know what it is that I'm looking for. Next step is to understand where is that data in Lightroom stored. I did some searching, found some blogs that looked like they were designed in the 90s, and discovered that Lightroom puts everything in a SQLite database. Database, okay, that sounds encouraging. So let's jump to other databases, ODBC. ODBC is a standard for accessing relational style databases. It's very widely used across the market. In this scenario, Tableau talks to the ODBC driver generically, and then the driver, Tableau or anybody else, and then the driver itself knows how to translate to that specific data source. Because it's a generic solution, lowest common denominator, it's maybe not optimal, but some is often better than none. So turns out SQLite is an embedded relational database, and it has an ODBC driver. So I went out looking, found one for Windows, go ahead and downloaded it, and then I wanted to learn a bit more about Tableau and SQLite. What a coincidence for my talk. There happens to be a great big article on Tableau's website for exactly how to interact with that. So it was really pretty simple to get access to my data. I downloaded and installed that driver. I chose other databases, ODBC, from the Tableau Connect menu. You get a general purpose dialog that pops up. From there, I selected the driver that I installed. Then that opened up its UI to select the Lightroom catalog. Then I had way too much fun poking and prodding my data and reverse engineering their schema. But topic for another day. So setting aside my example, why and when are you going to use other ODBC? It's great for when you want live or extract connections to relational data sources. When you're connecting live, it can be as fast as the underlying data source, and so your query is right there next to where the data lives, and so that can give you a great experience. In order to get started, you need Tableau, of course. You need an ODBC driver for your particular platform, and you may need a TDC, Tableau Data Source Customization file. More on that in a second. In order to get started, I would actually recommend looking at doing a quick search in the Tableau community. Sometimes there's multiple ODBC drivers available. Sometimes they have different limitations. They're optimized for different scenarios. Rather than going out and installing and testing a bunch of things, see if somebody's already done that work for you. If you do find something, whether or not you do find something, definitely check out the data source vendor. That's the best place, the most likely place to go ahead and find an ODBC driver that you can install. If they don't have one, check out one of the vendors. They might also have something for you. So ODBC, the other databases connector, I said it's generic. So when you're going ahead and connecting, the connector will actually query your particular driver for what capabilities and stuff that it supports. The answer it gets back may be missing information. It may be suboptimal. If you know the specifics, the TDC gives you the ability to manually override those values. Name connectors, of course, have already done this work for you. Here's the TDC for SQLite. We're not going to dive into this. There's a ton of information out there on these. There's a ton of them already built. Unfortunately, I've found that finding a TDC can be pretty messy. I was hoping that there'd be one clear spot. There wasn't. I found them in the community. I found them in our knowledge base. I found them in our documentation. I found them in our public wiki. And then I found stuff posted randomly on the internet. Go ahead and start with the forum, but it might be some work to find one of these. Although hopefully you can get started, validate that you can do what you need to do before you do this work. All right, here's where I was going to have a really cool magical creature. Instead, I have this angry or hungry or maybe just sleepy bear. Oh well. But like magical and unmagical creatures, there are traits you want to be aware of. Everything is not perfect. There are trade-offs that you're making. When you're using somebody else's driver, there are implementation questions. How high quality is it? Does it handle all the errors? Did they test it thoroughly? How did they implement it? Now this gets interesting. You can find relational, ODBC drivers for non-relational data sources. Because ODBC is such a widespread standard, companies will actually wrap the API for a web application like Marketo and then give you a relational interface to it. So Tableau is constantly querying the data for when you have a live connection. APIs can be very, very slow and limited in what they support. And so the connector will, or the driver will download all that data locally and serve it back to Tableau. This can give you a horrible experience. In that case, go ahead and create an extract. This means you also have to install something, keep it up to date. When you're authenticating to your data source, there might be real limitations there, especially like in that web app case, what it supports versus what ODBC supports. When it comes time to use it, support. Tableau is a challenge. Tableau might not be familiar with that driver. We're going to struggle to give you more information about it. You're also reliant on where you got it to keep it up to date and provide accurate documentation. And they're maybe not going to know much about Tableau, and so they're going to have general information that you have to translate to Tableau, and it just can be more challenging. When it comes time to scale out, you're going to have to install this driver on each node of Tableau server in order to perform refreshes. Tableau Online, of course, you're not allowed to install anything, although Tableau Bridge can connect to that driver installed locally on your premise and send up the data. There's also the challenges around performance. I said this is lowest common denominator. It doesn't have any of the optimizations that a name connector has. And then there's the question of platform support. Unfortunately, it's pretty common for something to be Windows only, so make sure that it's going to run all the places that you need it to. So other ODBC is probably your best first choice for a good experience. and complete functionality, Web Data Connector may be your second best option. They're particularly well suited to cloud applications, and how hard can that be? Seen this diagram before? No, this is just a description of all the apps and services and stuff in the marketing domain, broken down by category and subcategory. I love this because it shows the scope of the challenge that Tableau and its customers are facing in terms of accessing all the data out there. And this is just one domain. I blew up a section, which is, yeah, you might be able to see some of that. If you have a medium or larger size business, there's probably at least a couple of these logos that you have deployed. A lot of these apps share some common traits. A lot of them are SaaS, hosted in the cloud, and a lot of them have APIs for extending functionality and for integrating them with other applications. Note that I didn't say they have an API for analytics. So generally speaking, when do you use a web data connector? When what you want lives behind an HTTP API. Maybe the first thing that doesn't come to mind actually is internal applications. Custom stuff that you've written and deployed internally that Tableau can never create a name connector for. WDC can be a good fit for this. Of course, it can be great for SaaS cloud applications. And because it's extract only, we hide, the data engine hides all the limitations around query speeds and functionality from the user. In order to get started, you need the ability to write some JavaScript. How much really depends. You need a web server to host it, and you need the WDC 2.0 framework. There's two places you need to go to get started. First one is getting the WDC SDK, and then the next is the API documentation. SDK is simple. We've got a ton of information up available on GitHub, docs, sample connectors, etc. I never remember that URL though, so I always just go to developer.tableau.com, which links me out to this. There is also an active community available out there. This is other people writing and sharing their connectors. If you do write a connector, I would strongly encourage you to share it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to do everything. You could really help somebody out. You might solve their problem, or you might give them a big head start. From there, you need to go look at the API documentation. We're not going to build a connector today. That's out of the scope. But we can give you a little help for getting started. When you're looking at the API documentation, pay attention to authentication. How do you actually authenticate to this? Username and password? Okay, easy. Something like OAuth? That's going to be more work. You need to know if that's something that you have time and capability for. From there, go ahead and look at the endpoints. Remember early on when we identified the data that we needed? How can you access that data? If there's a specific value, you might need to hit one endpoint. You might need to hit up a combination of endpoints to pull back several tables worth of data. You might be hitting up the API for their reporting engine or their bulk export API if you're dealing with large volumes of data. Then also look at the format that those endpoints are returning. Is it giving you, JSON in the API response or something else? Look for code snippets. These can be pretty handy just for getting started and understanding what's going on. I see curl a lot of the time, something you can run in your command line. Often they'll also have samples that are focused on solving a business use case. And then for more complex APIs, sometimes you'll see full SDKs where that's their effort to make your life easier and take care of some stuff for you. Also make sure to look for some interactive learning opportunities. API explorers I find on some of my the APIs that I like better. This allows you to be in the documentation, run a query right there in your web browser, and see what it returns. You get to match it up with what you're seeing. Sometimes you can even run it against your own data. You'll sometimes find the API Explorer in other areas of the app, focused around integration and troubleshooting your integration. A connector is a Tableau integration with that app. If you don't have an API Explorer, all is not lost. Check out one of the REST clients available out there. Postman is really popular. Insomnia is my personal favorite. Without writing any code, without losing a day, this allows you to write some test queries and see what you get back and validate that it's going to do what you need to do. If the app has a sample that you can download and run, it can be really useful to use a debugging proxy like Fiddler. This allows you to watch everything going across the wire and can kind of give you a good sense of the big picture and what the overall flow looks like. So if you download our SDK, you'll get some sample connectors. One of them is the stock. It just pulls down the daily closing stock values for the last year. It is, including comments, 142 lines of code and 6 functions. Even if you don't write code, you probably can guess what some of these functions do. Writing WDCs can be pretty simple. It's something you can do in an afternoon. However, that's not always true. Connectors can also be very complex. We're not talking about it too much yet, but Tableau is building name connectors on WDC platform as well. We have a full team doing it. My team lead right there in the audience and his manager. And it takes us a while to do this. Our most recent connector, ServiceNow, actually was 16,000 lines of code plus tests, and that's not something that you go and do in an afternoon. So the functionality for a web data connector is pretty similar to what we saw before. Tableau makes a request or gives information to the connector. Then the connector is actually what knows about the data source. It makes any API calls, does whatever else is needed. It might transform the data, might augment the data, whatever it is going to work best for Tableau. Then it hands the data back, an extract is created, and then you get all those fast analytics queries across against it. So because the WDC can give you custom UI, you can have a pretty good experience. This is our ServiceNow connector. You open it, you authenticate. WDCs can ask the user for parameters to scope down the data that's being requested. And then from there, you go to the data source page, and you get the standard Tableau experience. I am cheating a bit, however, by showing you one of our WDCs. Unfortunately, they have some functionality that we haven't made available to you yet. More in a second. WDCs have their own trade-offs. One is you need to have deep, or you likely or often need to have deep knowledge of the API that you're connecting to. The documentation may be incomplete. We find bugs in the APIs that we're consuming all the time. Authenticating can be pretty challenging. OAuth is real common. For that, you probably want to look at hosting a separate service. Then you need the infrastructure for doing that. You might be doing a lot of data transformation and flattening. What happens when you have a nested array of complex objects that in turn have a nested array of properties? What of that data do you actually need to flatten and bring back to Tableau? And then, I mentioned infrastructure for the service and for the connector and deploying it, monitoring it, that it stays up. When you have errors, where do those logs go so that you can troubleshoot? It can get a little complicated. When you're using your connector, you're going to probably run into some platform limitations that you did not expect. Tableau has a lot of smarts around interpreting Excel and CSV files. None of that is available to WDCs. Unless you tell it explicitly otherwise, it's just going to bring things back as a string. You can't union. I'll talk more about the JSON connector, but its smarts also aren't available. Complex joins, say you have a fact table and you have the users table joined to it 3 times on different foreign keys. Tableau will actually go download the user table 3 full times. This hurts us as much as it hurts you, however, and so I would expect our story to continue to improve significantly around this topic. There's also the question of user experience. The default, the dialog that you all have access to has an ugly address bar on top. First time you load the connector, you get this red warning. Unless you've reverse engineered our UX patterns, it's going to look differently than Tableau, and so you don't get that integrated experience or the level of integrated experience that I just showed you. Hopefully that will change. And then the strength is also a weakness, extract only, and that just doesn't work for some scenarios. It definitely doesn't work if you're trying to pull down terabytes of data. or it doesn't work if you need real time. When the times come to scale these out, your Tableau server administrator actually has to make configuration changes in order to refresh. No third-party WDCs will run on Tableau Online, although you can use Bridge, but Bridge doesn't support OAuth, and so that might not also work for you. Then there's the interesting challenge around discovery and trust. How does your user, does your user know to use this connector? Do you post the URL on an internal website? Do you email it to them? Do they go find that email each time? Then they go ahead and paste in the address. And how do they know that your connector, really solves this problem versus, something that they found online? And what has what they need and what can they trust? Right now, this is a challenge that's up to you to solve. So far, we've been talking about some pretty complicated approaches, and that may be the exact opposite of what you need. Sometimes you just want to get down and dirty with the data, fast, see what's there, learn more about it. That's where the JSON file connector comes in. So it's really pretty straightforward. You got to connect the JSON file. It has to be a local file. From there, Tableau does some work on inferring the schema, gives you the option of choosing what you bring back and what you don't, and then you're off. I said it needs a local file, but you can get that from a web service or export from the application. You might do an export from your document database. Refreshes are manual in that you have to go get that file again each time, but you can use some sort of script or something to do that. The JSON's file connector's strengths are also its weaknesses. It's very simple. How do you get access to that file? You probably don't have a bunch of JSON files sitting on your desktop. Do you have to authenticate to where it comes from? The connector can't help you with that. Also note that once you connect, Tableau is expecting a consistent schema to come back, and that may not be what your data source has. Note that when you are using it, there are some usage limitations around complexity. We think the connector will work for most people most of the time, but know that there are limits out there, and you might bump into them. Also think about size. You're not going to want to go export gigabyte-sized JSON file and then connect to that. When it comes time to scale out for server to access the file, remember it needs to be able to access a local file, so maybe you put it on a shared network drive, but then how do you keep that up to date? Tableau Online, you can use Bridge, so the story there's not too bad, but what is the mechanism by which that data is being updated? So far, we've been focused on options that all exist within Tableau. We have another one, and that's the Tableau SDK, and it exists completely outside of Tableau. I mentioned WDCs are not appropriate for all situations. A great example of this is Bloomberg Enterprise. They will sell you a stream of high-quality business and financial information, and they give you a proprietary mechanism for accessing it. They have SDKs they expect you to use that come in C, C++, C#, Java, Perl, and Python. Note that there's not JavaScript listed there, and you're certainly not going to be running C# in your JavaScript code. This is where the type of scenario where the Tableau SDK excels. We give you a library for creating an SDK, and then it's completely up to you. You have the full power and capabilities of the ecosystems that exist around those languages. You can do complex data transformations, pull data from multiple sources, whatever it is that you need. You also have complete control over when any of this happens. If you have a system that gets heavily loaded during the day, you can run yours at night and not impact it. It is extract only, so no matter how slow and limited the underlying source is, it'll be fast in the data engine. In order to get started, what you need is the ability to write some code. The complexity here is, I don't know, it really depends on your situation. Of course, you need access to the data. You need infrastructure for running this code that you wrote. That might be as simple as the command line utility on your desktop, though. In order to get started, you need the Tableau SDK and whatever else it is. Getting the SDK is pretty simple. Go to developer.tableau.com. There's a link from there. But because where it goes from there is completely outside of Tableau, I don't have much information for you. Again, there are trade-offs to make. You actually have to install the SDK, expect some system dependencies to be there. It's not just drag and drop a file, unfortunately. Then you have to go do the implementation. That might be pretty challenging. You also have to authenticate to your data source, and so you might end up messing around with SAML or OAuth, or learning way more about those than you ever wanted. When it comes times for using the connector, Tableau doesn't know what you wrote, so we can't really help you with that, other than making sure that our SDK is working properly. If you're sharing this, you're going to be supporting the other people that are using it and the questions and stuff that they have. So in order to do that, you might write some documentation, but now you're a technical writer and a coder on top of whatever your day job is. And then things change over time. At a minimum, you have to keep the SDK in sync with the version of Tableau that you're using, and what you're connecting to and how you are probably isn't standing still either. Scaling out, actually the story's pretty good. So part of the SDK is the command line utility to just go ahead and push that extract to server or online. Great. But now you need to orchestrate that. What's the schedule by which that happens? What happens when there's an error? How do you troubleshoot that? There's also performance. You might be doing something pretty complicated. It might take a lot of time, more time than you actually have available. So now you might be messing around with incremental refreshes, running stuff in parallel, then that also gets very challenging. And then there's the issue of cross-platform support. What you just wrote on your Windows laptop probably doesn't run in a Linux container. So be aware of that up front on where this is ultimately going to end up, not just how to get started. So we've explored the connectivity space, learned more about it, learned more about how Tableau does it, what's available, is a name connector, what's not. We've examined 4 options for connecting to data when a name connector isn't available. So kind of, when do you use those for the 5 different types of data that we talked about? My first recommendation is to think about SQL support. Is there a nice, relational way of accessing the data, or are you looking at something else? Think about data size. If you've got petabytes, don't even think about creating an extract of that, at least not yet. Hyper. You're going to have to leave the data in the data source where it exists, or do something else like that. Also be thinking about the schema. Is it known? Is it in a format that works well for Tableau, or are you going to have to do some work and some massaging up front? So for the different types of data, for relational, absolutely focus on other ODBC. There's a good chance there's a driver out there. There are going to be some edge cases where one of the other options might be helpful, but for the most part, not. For OLAP cubes, also look for other ODBC, although some customers have had pretty good luck with Microsoft Analysis Services as well. For time series, identify the slice that you want from that, the structure for it. Other ODBC or WDC are probably your best bet there, at least to start. For document databases, it just depends on what you're connecting to and what you need. Really any of the options we covered here might be your best bet. For graph databases, hey, it's the Wild West. See if there's a way that you can pull out the data you need in a nice rectangular format. There may not be. And then look at using the SDK or WDC for doing that. So by now, I hope you have a better understanding of the options that are available to you. All that being said, I really wouldn't blame you if you said, man, I just want to connect. I've got a day job to do. I need to answer my question and then get on to my 10,000 other things. This is where the Ideas Forum comes into place. This is a place for Tableau customers to request features, upvote existing feature requests. If you need a connector, I would love to see your post or your upvote there. We pay a lot of attention to that, and it helps us prioritize and justify investments in connectors. So help us help you by visiting that if we don't support what you need. terms of related sessions, you can learn more from these two fine-looking gentlemen about the lessons that Tableau learned when building our own WDCs. I think that'll be more of an intermediate advanced course. And lastly, please, please, please do take a few seconds to submit a survey about the course. Let me know how I can be better and how Tableau can give you the information that you need. Thank you. Any questions?